Before we begin, I want you to imagine something: no cameras, no crowds with smartphones, no headlines breaking the story, just a man walking toward his own execution, not running, not hiding, walking. Now ask yourself this: why would someone willingly walk toward one of the most brutal deaths ever created? Because that's exactly what happened. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ wasn't an accident. It wasn't a sudden political mistake. It was a chain of decisions. By religious leaders, by a Roman governor, by a crowd, and ultimately by Jesus himself. And on that day, power clashed with truth. Fear overpowered justice, and love endured unimaginable suffering. This is not just a story. This is the day that divided history into before and after and today. We're going to step into it, not as readers, but as witnesses. It's the time of Passover. Jerusalem is overflowing with people. What is normally a city of around 50,000 has now swelled into hundreds of thousands. Pilgrims have traveled from distant lands. The streets are crowded. The markets are loud. The air is thick with anticipation, because Passover isn't just a celebration, it's a reminder that the Jewish people were once under foreign rule and were delivered. But now, once again, they are under foreign rule. Rome rules with force. Roman soldiers patrol the streets, constantly watching, waiting. Any sign of rebellion is crushed instantly. And into this already tense environment comes Jesus. Just days earlier, he entered the city to cheers. Crowds shouted, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." They believed he might be the one, the Messiah, a deliverer. But not everyone was celebrating. The religious leaders were watching closely, because Jesus wasn't just gaining attention. He was challenging them. He exposed hypocrisy. He questioned authority. He disrupted the system. And in their eyes, that made him dangerous. It's Thursday night. Jesus gathers with his disciples for a meal, what would later be called the Last Supper. But in that moment, they don't know it's the last. Room is quiet. There's tension in the air. Jesus begins to speak in a way that unsettles them. He talks about suffering, about leaving, about things coming to an end, and then he says something that changes the entire atmosphere. "One of you will betray me." Silence. The disciples look at each other, confused, concerned, one by one. They ask, "Is it me?" Think about that moment. No one immediately points fingers, because betrayal isn't obvious. It's hidden. Jesus identifies Judas quietly, and Judas leaves into the night. And from that moment, everything is set in motion. After the meal, Jesus walks with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, a garden just outside the city. This is where everything slows down, where the noise fades, and the weight of what's coming becomes real. Jesus tells most of the disciples to wait. He takes a few of them further in, and then he says something deeply human. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow, to the point of death." This is not calm. This is not detached. This is anguish. He asks them to stay awake and pray. Then he goes further, alone, and he falls to the ground. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." The cup represents suffering. everything that is about to happen, the pain, the humiliation, the death, and in that moment, you see the full humanity of Jesus. He does not want the suffering, but then he says, "Yet not as I will, but as you will." That sentence changes everything because in that moment, he chooses the path ahead. The stress is so intense that his body begins to react. His sweat becomes like drops of blood falling to the ground. This is a rare condition caused by extreme stress. This is not symbolic. This is real. Meanwhile, his disciples fall asleep. Not once, but multiple times. In the most critical moment, they cannot stay awake, and then everything changes. The stillness is broken. Voices. Footsteps. Glow of torches in the distance. A crowd is coming. Armed. Organized, and leading them. Is Judas one of the 12? Someone who walked with Jesus, learned from him, ate with him, and now betrays him. He walks up to Jesus and kisses him. A simple gesture, but in that moment, it becomes betrayal. Jesus looks at him and says, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" There is no anger, no shouting, only truth. The soldiers step forward. One of the disciples reacts instantly. He draws a sword and strikes a servant. Chaos breaks out, but Jesus stops it. Immediately, no more of this. And then, he does something unexpected. He heals the wounded man. Even now, in the moment of his arrest, he chooses peace. He turns to the crowd and says, "Am I leading a rebellion, that you have come with swords and clubs?" But he does not resist, because this moment was always part of the path. And then they take him. Jesus is brought before the religious authorities, first Annas, then Caiaphas, the high priest. This is supposed to be a trial, but it isn't fair. They are not searching for truth. They are searching for a reason to condemn him. Witnesses are brought in, but their stories don't match. The accusations are inconsistent. The process begins to fall apart. Frustrated, the high priest finally asks directly, "Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." The room goes quiet. Everyone is waiting, and Jesus answers, "You have said so, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power." That statement is enough. The high priest tears his robes. Blasphemy. The decision is made instantly, not based on evidence, but belief. They declare that Jesus must die, and then the situation turns violent. They spit on him. They blindfold him. They strike him and mock him. Prophecy. Who hit you? This is no longer a trial. It is humiliation. As morning begins, the religious leaders face a problem. They want Jesus executed, but they don't have the authority. Only Rome can carry out a death sentence, so they take him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. But there is another problem. Blasphemy means nothing to Rome, so they change the accusation. Now, Jesus is presented as a political threat, a man claiming to be a king, a possible rival to Caesar. This is strategic, because Rome does not tolerate threats, and this is where everything shifts from religious conflict to political pressure, from accusation to execution, because now Jesus stands before the most powerful powerful authority in the region, and what happens next will determine everything. Jesus now stands inside the Roman Praetorium, the headquarters of power in Jerusalem. This is no longer a religious matter. This is Rome, and Rome deals in power, control, and order. The center of it all is one man, Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor, a political survivor, a man who understands one thing above all else: keep the peace at any cost, because if Jerusalem erupts into chaos, Rome will hold him responsible. Pilate looks at Jesus. This is not what he expected. No army, no weapons, no resistance, just a man, beaten, exhausted, yet calm. Pilate begins the interrogation. Are you the king of the Jews? It's not a spiritual question. It's political, because kings challenge Caesar, and challenges to Caesar are crushed. Jesus responds, "Is that your own idea, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate pauses. This is not the answer he expected. Am I a Jew? He replies, "Your own people handed you over to me. What have you done?" And then Jesus says something that shifts everything. "My kingdom is not of this world." Pilate listens carefully. This doesn't sound like rebellion. It doesn't sound like a man building an army. Jesus continues, "If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my rest. In other words, I am not your enemy." Pilate understands power, and this does not look like power as he knows it. Still, he presses further. "You are a king, then?" Jesus answers, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth." And then Pilate asks a question that echoes through history. What is truth? For a moment, everything slows down, because this question is not just about Jesus, it's about Pilate, a man who lives in a world where truth shifts depending on power, where survival matters more than justice, where decisions are made not based on what is right, but on what is safe. And now, standing in front of him is someone completely different, someone calm under pressure, someone who speaks of truth as something absolute, unshakable, and it unsettles him. Pilate steps outside to face the crowd. "I find no basis for a charge against this man. That should be the end of it. But it isn't, because the crowd is growing louder, and the religious leaders are not backing down. They push harder, accusing, insisting, demanding action. So Pilate looks for a way out. He learns that Jesus is from Galilee, and that gives him an idea. Galilee falls under the authority of Herod Antipas, so Pilate sends Jesus to Herod, a political move, a way to shift responsibility. Herod has been wanting to see Jesus for a long time, not out of faith, but curiosity. He has heard the stories, miracles, teachings, crowds. He hopes to see something spectacular, a sign, a performance. He begins to question Jesus eagerly, but Jesus says nothing, not a single word. That silence is powerful, because Herod is used to control, used to being entertained. used to people trying to impress him. But Jesus refuses. He does not perform, he does not defend himself, he does not engage. And that silence becomes an insult. Frustrated, Herod and his soldiers begin to mock him. They dress him in a robe, a fake king, a joke. They laugh, they ridicule, and then they send him back to Pilate. Still no crime, still no evidence, only humiliation. Jesus stands before Pilate once again, and now the pressure intensifies. Pilate tries to reason with the crowd. You brought me this man as one who was inciting rebellion. I have examined him and found no basis for your charges. He reminds them, neither has Herod. He has done nothing to deserve death. So Pilate offers a compromise. I will have him punished and then release him to Pilate. This seems reasonable, a middle ground, but the crowd erupts. No, this is where everything changes, because this is no longer about evidence. It's about momentum. The religious leaders move through the crowd, whispering, influencing, shaping the narrative. This man is dangerous. He will bring Rome down on us. He is not the one. And slowly, the crowd begins to shift. Crowds are powerful, but they are also unpredictable. Emotion spreads quickly, especially fear, especially anger. Individually, people might hesitate, but in a crowd, hesitation disappears. Responsibility fades and voices grow louder, stronger, more unified, until one message takes over everything. Crucify him. Pilate makes one final attempt. There is a custom. During Passover, one prisoner can be released, a gesture of goodwill. So Pilate presents a choice: Jesus or Barabbas. Barabbas is a known criminal, a rebel, possibly involved in violence. This should be an easy decision, but it isn't, because the crowd has already been influenced, already been shaped, and when the moment comes, they shout, "Give us Barabbas." Pilate is stunned. He asks, "What shall I do then with Jesus?" The answer comes back louder than before: "Crucify him." Pilate tries again. Why? What crime has he committed? But logic no longer matters. Reason has no place here. Only noise, only pressure, only demand. Crucify him. At this moment, Pilate realizes something. This situation is slipping out of his control. And if it turns into a riot, Rome will hold him responsible. And then comes the final push, the final threat. If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. That sentence changes everything, because now this is personal, this is political, this is dangerous. Pilate is no longer weighing justice. He is weighing survival, so he calls for water in front of the crowd. He washes his hands. I am innocent of this man's blood. But this is not innocence. This is surrender. Because immediately after he gives the order, Jesus is sentenced to crucifixion, the most brutal form of execution Rome has, reserved for the worst offenders, designed not just to kill, but to make an example, to instill fear, to send a message. And just like that, the decision is final. There is no turning back, no appeal, no escape. And now, the physical suffering begins, because before the cross comes something many people do not fully understand: the scourging and what happens next. will push the human body to its absolute limit. Before Jesus is taken to the cross, there is something else, something many people underestimate, something so brutal that many victims never even survived it. The scourging. Jesus is stripped of his clothing, exposed, humiliated. He is bound to a post, his arms stretched, his back left completely unprotected. There is no defense, no escape. The instrument used is not a simple whip. It is designed to tear multiple leather cords, each embedded with sharp pieces of metal or bone. When it strikes, it does not just cut the surface, it grips, and when it is pulled back, it tears flesh away. The first strike lands. A sharp crack cuts through the air. The skin breaks instantly. Pain surges through his body, then another strike, and another, and another. There is no rhythm, no mercy, only repetition. With each blow, the wounds deepen, skin gives way to muscle. Muscle begins to separate. Blood begins to pour. The body reacts violently. Breathing becomes unstable. Shock begins to set in. The pain becomes overwhelming. This is not just punishment. This is destruction. From a medical perspective, this level of trauma causes severe blood loss. The body begins to weaken rapidly. The heart struggles to keep up. Risk of collapse increases with every strike. And still, it continues. At this point, many would already be dead. But Jesus survives. Barely. The scourging ends. But the suffering does not. The soldiers begin to mock him, not as a prisoner, but as entertainment. They place a robe on his shoulders, a symbol of royalty. But here, it is meant as ridicule. They take branches filled with long, sharp thorns and twist them together into a crown. Then they force it onto his head, not gently, pressed down with force. The thorns pierce deep into the skin. Blood begins to run down his face, into his eyes. They place a staff in his hand, kneel before him, mocking, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then they strike him, and again, driving the thorns deeper, spitting on him, laughing. This is no longer punishment. This is humiliation. They strip the robe from him, reopening the wounds and prepare him for execution. A heavy wooden beam is brought forward, rough, splintered, heavy. This is what he must carry. The beam is placed onto his shoulders, against torn flesh, against open wounds. Pain surges instantly, and then he is forced to walk. The streets are filled with people watching, some curious, some silent, some mocking. Step by step, he moves forward, weak, unstable, barely standing. The blood loss is severe, trauma overwhelming. He stumbles and falls. The weight of the beam crashes down with him. His body hits the ground hard. For a moment, everything stops. Then the soldiers force him up again. He continues, but only for a short distance. He falls again. At this point, it becomes clear he may not survive the walk. The soldiers look into the crowd and grab a man, Simon, a passerby, not involved, not prepared. He is forced forward. The beam is placed on him, and now he carries the cross. Imagine that moment, being pulled from the crowd, forced into someone else's suffering, walking beside a man who is broken, bleeding, and yet still moving forward. The journey continues slowly along the way. There are those who weep, women in the crowd, mourning, grieving. Jesus turns to them and says, "Do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and your children." Even now, he is thinking beyond himself. Finally, they arrived to Golgotha, place of the skull, a hill outside the city where executions happen public. Visible final before the crucifixion begins. A drink is offered, wine mixed with a substance to dull pain. Jesus tastes it and refuses. He does not choose escape. He does not choose numbness. He chooses to face everything fully. And now, we arrive at the moment most people think they understand, the crucifixion itself. But what actually happened on that cross is far more intense, far more painful, and far more significant than most realize, because what comes next will change everything. The cross is laid down, roughwood against the ground. This is the moment everything has been leading to. Jesus is brought forward. His body, already broken, his strength, nearly gone, and still, he does not resist. His arm is stretched out. A soldier positions a nail, heavy, cold, unforgiving. The hammer rises and comes down. The nail is driven through his wrist. Pain surges through his entire body, sharp, immediate, unrelenting. The other arm is stretched out. The same process, same brutality. Then his legs are positioned, bent slightly, one foot placed over the other. A single nail is driven through both. Now his body is fixed to the cross, held in place, unable to escape. The soldiers lift the cross slowly, and then they drop it into place. The impact sends shock through his body, every wound, every nerve, every part of him. And now the suffering begins. Crucifixion is not designed for quick death. It is designed for endurance, for prolonged pain. To breathe, he must push himself upward against the nails. Every breath costs him. Push up. To inhale, collapse. To exhale, again and again. And again. His strength begins to fade. His muscles begin to fail. But still, he endures. Around him, the crowd gathers, watching, waiting. Some mock him. He saved others, but he cannot save himself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. Even those beside him join in it. First, voices filled with anger, pain, bitterness, and then something changes. Jesus speaks, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." In the middle of unimaginable suffering, he chooses forgiveness, not anger, not revenge. Forgiveness. One of the criminals begins to see something different. We are punished justly, but this man has done nothing wrong. He turns to Jesus. "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus responds, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." Even now, he offers hope. Near the cross stands his mother, watching, silent, heartbroken. Jesus sees her. "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple beside her, "Here is your mother." Even in this moment, he is caring for others. Time passes slowly, painfully. Then something changes. The sky begins to darken, not gradually, not naturally, but suddenly darkness covers the land. For hours, the atmosphere shifts, the weight of the moment deepens, and then Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The weight of the moment is overwhelming. Then he says, "I thirst." His body is dehydrated, drained, exhausted. A sponge is lifted to him, a small act, in a moment of immense suffering. And then he speaks again. It is finished, not defeat, completion, everything fulfilled. The mission accomplished. He takes one final breath. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And then he dies. That moment, the earth begins to shake, the ground trembles violently, rocks split, and inside the temple, a massive curtain is torn into from top to bottom. Something has changed. A Roman soldier stands nearby, watching everything. He has seen death before, many times, but not like this. And he says, "Surely this was the Son of God." The crowd begins to leave, the noise fades, the hill grows quiet. The cross remains, and for a moment, it feels like the end. But it isn't, because what happened that day did not just end a life. It changed history. A moment where justice and injustice collided, where power and truth stood face to face. A moment that continues to echo, even now. And whether you see it as history, or faith, or both, one thing is certain: that day changed the world forever.